In 2016, Nike debuted a new flagship running shoe, touting benefits such as a vanishing fit and a laser-siped cushioning setup. I decided to put the LunarEpic Flyknit to the test, and I've really enjoyed my time with the sneaker. Let's take a look. Hey all, what is up? Reese here, and I've got a brand new sneaker review for you. What we're looking at today is the Nike LunarEpic Flyknit. This is the black, volt, Rio teal, and clear jade colorway, and this silhouette debuted on March 3rd, 2016 with a retail price of $175. We've also seen a low top version of the shoe that retails for $160. This will be a little bit different than my average sneaker review because I'm actually going to be bringing in the performance aspects of the shoe. I'll talk about the different things that Nike did to make this a good running shoe, and then I'll also touch on my personal experiences, both the good and the bad, after having these as my main running shoes for the past few months. Now, as we're going through this video, I'd love for you to leave a comment down below and let me know what you think about the LunarEpic Flyknit. I'd love to hear if you have a pair, whether it's just for casual wear or if you actually run in them. If you enjoy this video, and specifically if you'd like to see more of these performance-oriented running shoe reviews, don't forget to leave a thumbs up on the video. And finally, if you're new to my channel, make sure to subscribe to stay up to date with all of my latest videos. This is the first Nike running shoe that I purchased to actually run in a long time. For a couple years, I was really pretty heavily using Brooks running shoes, but when Nike debuted the LunarEpic Flyknit, there were so many interesting things about the shoe that I just really had to try it out. I was intrigued both by some of the features that Nike was touting, but also honestly by the style of the shoe. I think this is a really good looking shoe. I know the collar can be a bit polarizing on the high top version, but for me that's something that I actually really like and that helps kind of set the design apart. I decided I would grab a pair and try them, and if I didn't like them as a running shoe, I could pretty easily add them to my casual rotation. But I ended up really liking these as kind of my primary running sneaker. I've put more than 200 miles on them so far, and that's been everything from short 2 and 3 mile runs all the way up to my second half marathon was actually completed in these. And I've had a lot of really good experiences, and I've just enjoyed getting to learn about the shoe. And that's why I wanted to make this video now, is I thought it'd be interesting to kind of look at the shoe from that longer term perspective, you know, where I'm over 200 miles and I've really kind of worn the shoe in well, so we can talk about both the good and the bad, but then also how this sneaker is holding up. I think this will also be interesting because the LunarEpic platform probably isn't going to be changing a whole lot, at least in the near future. We've already seen the second version of the low top form of the shoe release, and a lot of it is very similar. They did rework the upper slightly, but it's still that basic formula of the tight-fitting Flyknit upper, and then the cushioning and midsole setup is actually completely identical. So there's a lot that we'll be able to talk about here that'll translate to even those newer versions of the shoe. Now, with all that said, let's dive right into a close-up view, and we'll kind of go through the two main areas of the shoe. I'll talk about the good and the bad, and the interesting things to note of both the upper and then the cushioning and outsole setup. We'll kick things off with a look at the upper. These feature Flyknit construction that for the most part is just pure Flyknit. You do have flywire cables that form the lacing system kind of at the midfoot. There's a bit of fuse just at the heel to form this heel cup. And then you have this strip of fabric that runs up the back of the shoe and then inside as well, basically covering the one seam in the Flyknit. For the rest of the shoe though, you just have that knit material, so there's no fuse backing it, there's no kind of caging system. And what that means is that you have areas like right here where you can see there's a much tighter stitching pattern just to make sure that those areas where you're going to be putting a lot of pressure on the shoe as your foot kind of shifts around aren't going to wear down. The other thing to note is because of the fact that you've only got Flyknit, this is not a stretchy Flyknit at all, and that just again helps with the structure of the shoe and keeps your foot where it needs to be so that you're not kind of pushing out over the sides or over the front of the footbed as you're running. Again, for the lacing system, you have flywire, and to be perfectly honest, I never really took or take advantage of that. I laced these up when I first got them, but I haven't touched it since, and that's because I just am able to slip them on every day. That's due to the pretty interesting collar system on these. This is the one part of the upper that's stretchy. As you can see, there's a ton of elasticity here, and it has a tight fit on your ankle as well. And the idea is that when you put these on, this kind of hugs your ankle and is the part of the shoe that actually keeps you locked down and from moving up and down or kind of forward and backward while you're running in them. It's a very interesting feeling, but you pretty quickly learn to kind of forget about it. As a matter of fact, Nike touted the benefit of this system by calling it a vanishing fit upper. And to be honest, I thought that that was a marketing gimmick, oh, like that sounds like a really good thing to say. But what I noticed was, as this does kind of have that tight fit, it's easy to feel like this is just more of a sock. And then the rest of the upper, because you really just have that pure Flyknit implementation, again, you get that sock-like feel, or even kind of, you don't really feel like there's much there. And so it's very easy to forget that you have anything on when you're running, even as you get into longer runs, which is a really cool part of the shoe and something I wasn't expecting. Now, as far as socks go, Nike does obviously recommend wearing socks with them, but I found it doesn't matter whether I'm wearing low-cut socks that sit, about here, or higher crew-cut socks that sit over the top of the collar. The sensation was identical for me. One thing to know is that some people have reported issues with rubbing, kind of right here where this heel cup is formed inside the shoe. So just try them on, make sure you're aware that that could be a problem. I never had issues with that, but that definitely does not mean that you won't. Now, with all that said, there are a couple downsides to an upper like this. My biggest problem with like a Flyknit upper is that if you're trying to wear them in inclement weather, it's not a great experience. It's a fairly, loose material. As you can see, you've got some pretty wide open stitching right there on the top of the toe box. And so it's easy for water and moisture to kind of penetrate and make your foot wet. So that's one time when I definitely would not recommend these. I also have found with Flyknit shoes, they're not great running in the cold. And it's the same idea that just cold really permeates this material, and so your feet will get cold, which isn't a great experience. But other than that, I really have enjoyed the upper on these. It's a unique experience for sure. One thing to note as well is because you don't have, any sort of caging system and your foot's a little more free in this shoe, the stability is a little weird, and it's not a problem. It's not like I felt like, I was kind of slipping over the sides of the shoe, or that I was going to roll my ankle or anything like that when I was wearing them. But it's different than the sensation of a lot of other running shoes. So give yourself a few runs to kind of get used to that and understand how this shoe performs. We'll take a look now at the cushioning system on these sneakers. You've got a dual density Lunarlon setup. So you've got basically a softer internal layer and then this kind of denser and more firm Lunarlon forming the main part of the midsole and the outsole that you actually see. If we flip down to the bottom, you can see this green foam right here is the softer Lunarlon, and then the white is the firmer Lunarlon. And now one thing to note here as well is there's no rubber on the outsole. It's all that Lunarlon material. So I was kind of curious how the shoes would hold up to a lot of running without having, dedicated rubber to kind of wear down. And I've got to say I've been pretty impressed with the way it's both held up and also where it really hasn't been a degraded running experience. I don't feel like the Lunarlon has been compromised too much in more than 200 miles. There are some areas where I've worn through, as you can see right there, getting down into the second layer of Lunarlon. I've got some areas of wear up here, but for the most part, it's pretty much on par with what I would expect from having more than 200 miles on any running shoe. Now, the big innovation touted here for the cushioning system are these grooves that you see cut both into the midsole and the outsole. It's a technique called laser siping. That's basically using lasers to cut these grooves throughout the Lunarlon. On the midsole, the goal is to improve the heel to toe transition as you're kind of going through your foot strike. As you know, you go from the heel and then you move forward. The idea is that it kind of compresses along the way, leading to a more natural feeling. For the outsole, you've got these 5 different pods that are mapped to kind of key areas where you're putting a lot of pressure down through your running stride. And Nike compares each of these concentric rings to pistons. And the idea is that so each of them kind of sticks out a little further from the shoe as you get more into the center. It's hard to see here because I have worn these down a fair amount, but the idea behind that is that you'll compress what you need. So kind of starting from the center and working out, you'll compress what you need for how much basically pressure and weight you're putting at each of these areas. And that leads to a kind of customized ride and customized cushioning as you're running. Now, overall, this system is definitely on the firm side of a foam style cushioning setup. It's Nothing that's a problem. I know firm sometimes sounds like it's bad, but more it's just you don't feel like an incredible amount of cushioning. It's not like with every step you're like, wow, I can feel myself sinking down in, as you would with something like Adidas's Boost material. The nice thing about a system like this, though, is that it's incredibly consistent. You don't feel a lot of that cushioning, but you also don't feel a lot of what you're running on, and it's something that stays true no matter how long you're running. This is one of the best shoes I've worn in terms of overall like foot and knee fatigue, even after a longer 10 or 12 mile run. And that's the thing that I think is the benefit of this Lunarlon setup and why you get a little bit more out of having that slightly firmer cushioning setup. I honestly don't have a lot to complain about with this setup. One of the bigger things just to note is that on the outsole, all of these grooves are just absolute rock magnets. You can see I've got a few in there, and this is actually pretty good for how it normally is. One thing to note, though, is for the most part, those don't affect your run until you start to get a lot, where then you can maybe feel it as you're kind of compressing down, and there's kind of like a weird sensation. That just probably means you've got some rocks caught in there. And so it is annoying every now and then you have to take like a toothpick or something to clean it out. But overall, in the grand scheme of things, that's not a huge deal. And so that about wraps it up for my review of the LunarEpic Flyknit. As you can tell, I've really enjoyed running in these. I was honestly not expecting to love this shoe, but I've absolutely had a blast. If you're interested, you can find them in a lot of different colors on sale right now, so just kind of keep an eye out for that. If you haven't already, definitely leave a comment below and let me know what you think about these. I'd especially like to hear about your pros and cons if you've run in them. But with all that said, thank you so much for watching this video, and have a great day.